Welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 215. Today we're going to be talking about the Autumn-Fall Challenge, or rather looking at the submissions. I've had 15 different people from around the world send in their images, their interpretation of the Autumn/Fall Challenge. So that's primarily what we're going to be doing. Stick around, leave a comment, let me know you're here, and we'll make a start. Yes, so welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 215. So yes, if you're looking to improve your understanding of photography, hopefully you're in the right place. So what we're going to be doing today is, well, 2 weeks ago I set an autumnal challenge, or fall as it's known in America, and said send me in your images that kind of represented. And I ran through a whole bunch of ideas, different ways you could look at it, and we've had several people send in images. And so what we're going to be doing today is looking through those and seeing what other people have done, and hopefully getting inspired to go out and take versions of our own with this. Now I see we've got a couple of people in already, so just quick hellos. April says, greetings from a sunny and cool autumn Long Island, New York. We are UK time now. Well, okay, so that's caught up with, yes, there was a slight confusion last week because we had the clocks went back here last week in the UK, but of course they've only just gone back probably last night here, well, with you in North, those of you in North America. So there was a slight sort of bit there where not everybody lined up properly. John says hello all from a warm mid-Ohio, and Susan says hello from a rather grey day in Kakubri. Janet joins us from a rather cool Mississauga, not really cold though. Stacy's joined us, said good morning all, cold and brisk, felt the chill taking out the 3 dogs before feeding them. And Marilyn says hello from a chilly but sunny Colorado. So this is it. So if you yeah, if you whether you've been here, if you've not been here before, then just join in the conversation. You can see we've got a friendly bunch. Leave a note to let me know who you are, where you're from, and what the weather's doing. Get the chat going. And in the meantime as well, make sure you subscribe, hit the notification bell, and like. If you're quite enjoying this video, then hit the like below. The YouTube algorithms always seem to quite enjoy these kind of things, or rather, I enjoy the results of them. Well, actually, they're probably too low to make that much difference. However, it still helps, better than having no likes at all. So where are we going to start? Well, actually, what we'll do first, just briefly, we'll do a Smug Points update. So at the end of October, Viji was the Smug Points winner. So Smug Points, for anybody who might be tuning in for the first time, what they are is a way of recognising contributions to the podcast. So you get 5 Smug Points just for turning up and leaving a comment and saying hello. To do that live. If you submit an image for critique or feedback, then you get 25 Smug Points. If you submit an image for the challenge, like today, all 15 people who've sent in images for the challenge will get 10 Smug Points. And then there are bonus Smug Points because I'll choose a top 3, so there's extra 30, 20 and 10 points to come for my top 3. And so it goes on. So there's Smug Points to be accumulated, and if you accumulate the most Smug Points in a month, then you get to choose what the next challenge will be. So Viji was the winner for last week. So I've already been in contact with her. So she's come up with an idea for what for the challenge for for November's challenge, and I'll be telling you about that a bit later. So stick around to the end of the podcast, and we'll chat about that. Right. Meg's joined us. Says hello everyone, and Stacey's also asking if everyone's enjoying Halloween, and yeah, so little bits of chat going on in the chat room. Cool. Right, where should we go? Oh yes, one last thing with the Smug Points actually is the notion of we are coming up towards the end of the year. Now we're into the kind of final run. So as well as the monthly Smug Points, there's been an accumulation across the year of Smug Points, and when we get to the end of the year, I'll toss up who's got the most Smug Points across the year, and we'll work out something like I think I'm going to do sort of a free mentoring session for whoever's accumulated the most Smug Points. Now if you happen to be localish, then we can meet up and we can do some kind of mentoring session in person. Otherwise we can do something via Zoom That's the idea. Now, at the moment, Viji is running the leaderboard on that, but Robert and April are not too far behind. Susan, Sandra, Janet and Nadia, I would say, are still within easy shot if you want to make sure that you really kind of contribute and throw in images for challenges and for feedback and stuff like that. There's an outside chance you could get these. Well, also, on an outside chance, maybe if everybody else goes quiet and you really come in with it, Meg, Marilyn, John, Robert Schaefer are still kind of in with a sort of outsider's chance on that one. So that's where we are with the Smug Points accumulation. Right, okay, so let's make a start then. So what we talked about then is this notion of a fall or autumn challenge. And this challenge was set up by April, who won the September Smug Points. She wanted to get an idea of how different people might approach photographing autumn. And so there's, like I said, we've had 15 different people, and I think probably the best thing, let's just make a start. So, kind of in order that I downloaded them. So let me just, right, I'll swing that bit across there, and then if I'm lucky and I hit that, you should now be able to see this one from Susan. So, Susan sent this one in, back from a trip from Cornwall. She said, where autumn doesn't seem to have even arrived yet. And it is one of those things, I know, I've lived in Scotland for about 35-ish years, and we're a bit further north than down in southern England, and where I came up from Devon. And I've always noticed just how much earlier autumn seems to hit this part of the world, or this part of the country. And it is, I've had this before, where I remember in middle of November going down south and thinking that autumn had barely started. But here it's well and truly underway. In fact, we're practically into winter because the storms came and blew most of the leaves off the trees. And not a lot of trees that have got many leaves left, a few handful of brown ones dangling, holding on at the moment. If we have another storm, that'll be it, gone. But as Susan says, down in Cornwall, autumn barely seems to have arrived. So she said, although not a new image, I do think it's appropriate for your challenge. This was taken at the Waterfall on the Raiders Road near Clattering Shores. I know the place well, and if you go there during the summer, you get absolutely eaten alive by the midges. So yeah, autumn, winter, early spring, those are the best times to go to the Waterfall. It was on a fairly overcast day. I was attracted by the clump of grasses in the bottom third and decided to make that my focal point. I crouched down to get a decent angle, thereby getting wet feet and a wet bottom, which enabled me to get more of the little waterfalls in. I chose a slowish shutter speed, half a second, to soften the water, and fired off a few shots. In Photoshop, I did a little bit of dodging and burning, especially on the clump of grass. And I think this is a rather beautiful image, this. And it does, you get that, you can kind of, with the brown bracken behind, you can, and again, the brown bits in the water, obviously it's been raining a bit, the mud's got stirred up a little bit, so you've got that kind of the peatiness of it's kind of getting into the water. It's very autumnal, you can kind of smell, I think it's got that kind of smell to it, and the slower shutter speed allowing that sort of smoothing out of the waterfall, I think is a really lovely image. So thanks for sending that one in, Susan. A great image. Comments. Adrian's joined us. Hi Adrian, glad you could make it again. Says, I like Susan's water, slow shutter image. Marilyn says, beautiful Susan. April says, cool, where? That's April and Stacy in the middle of a conversation about the Bronx Zoo, I think. John says, nice treatment of the water. Excellent. Right, okay, let's move on then to, excuse me. We will move on to Sandra. Yes, so this is from Sandra. She says, this is a photo I took last Sunday in Leesowes Park. It's a local park close to where I live, and as you can see, it was a beautiful sunny day. The trees the tree leaves were turning orange and being reflected in the lake. And yeah, so I think that other use of water, you can use the slow shutter speed to get that beautiful creamy sense of the water, but you can also use it for reflections. And when you've got that nice kind of colours going on, that can really boost it. What I would say about this one though, Sandra, is that I think there's possibilities for just, you don't need a lot of editing, but just a minimal edit could really boost this image. There's a sense of it being slightly dull compared to what it might be. So I'll just do a quick kind of edit to show you what I mean. If we open this in Photoshop, sorry, let me just change that workspace to, no, wrong one. Swap it to there. So now hopefully I'm not blocking the image. And literally with this one, if we go to the levels, now, if you look at the little histogram down here, you can see that basically we can bring it up to here without really worrying about any blowout, just to where the first little peak comes in. But what I'm also aware of is quite often when you've got this sort of peak, trough, another little peak, and then coming up, is that quite often means there's maybe only one small patch which is maybe going to brighten out. So if we take this and we bring it to the next one, so we brighten up, we get more out of the trees, but what we find is the sky is starting to go. So at this point, I think we can just do a little bit of masking. If I, over here on the over here on the levels bit, we can see the mask, and if I just make sure that that's at black, so that what happens is wherever I paint, the lower, the picture below it just comes back into what it was. I can just sort of darken down that sky. So I've got that on 36. Let's take that up to 100. Now I can darken down that sky a bit, and maybe just the little bit where it's strongly in the reflection. Now that's maybe just a touch, and I don't want to have it too kind of a hard bit, so what I will do is I'll drop that down to sort of about 30-40%, widen that and just kind of soften the blend a little bit. So I need to flick that over to white again just to gently bring that back in on the edges. And when we do that, now you can see what's happened with the histogram. Because we've got that, it's got rid of these peaks, and we can still see that there's more to move. So if I drag this over to the left, up to the beginning of here, now we're getting a really nice bright image, but without any bits kind of blowing out from it. And then I think if we really wanted a quick little bit of dodge and burn, what's really with this photo, what really stands out is where you've got these little patches of orangey yellow coming from the beach. So if I duplicate that layer for a moment, and then if I go to a dodge and burn, and if I take a dodge, I dodge, say, the mid-tones, I've got the mid-tone set at 6%, and I can just loosely run slightly over the kind of yellowy orange bits, a little bit like that, and a couple of these bits in the reflections. I don't want to do the whole thing, I'm just really wanting to kind of capture the deeper colours, but then I'll also do a slight burn of the shadows. I've got the shadows set at 4%, and then I go over the same little areas, and what that does then is it really makes, it kind of creates like a contrast, but just in a very selected area, and we maybe just slightly overdone. Yeah, just pull that one down a little bit. Again, I'm just trying to do it on these little bits up here. And now I think what we have, so what we can see, if I just group those two together, we've gone from that to that, okay, by lightening it up and just kind of a little bit of dodge and burn. And now I think we have the picture, which is what you essentially had in mind when you're standing there, and you can hear the ripples of the water, you've got a slight breeze on your skin, and you're seeing these glorious colours. Then you bring out the camera, you take the photo, but the camera tends to kind of, it's not necessarily bringing out what you're experiencing. When we've got the two-dimensional and you're trying to express that to somebody else, then actually just being able to lift those colours a bit more, create those little bits of contrast, I think tends to reflect much more how we felt what it was when we were standing there in front of it. So anyway, a little bit there, Sandra. I hope that you actually find that useful. Thought it was probably worth mentioning. Okay, what have we got? Susan's thanking everybody for the comments. Stacy says nice colouring. And John says, oh, I like this shot when it's brightened. Meg says, I love the reflections of the trees in the water. April says, makes a big difference with the editing. Adrian says, nice re-edited in the lighter version. Susan says, gorgeous reflection, Sandra. And April says, the water was perfect for that reflection. Excellent. Right. let's move on then. So what we're moving on to now is Meg. So my daughter Meg was out in the garden the other day with her phone trying to find various different ways of finding autumn, and she found these bramble leaves, and she says, "Hi Dad, I really like the curves and the diagonals of the bramble leaves, which I took because this one feels interesting." And what's really lovely here is that we've got that contrast, the contrast I think of these of the yellows and tinting into the reddy browns against the last of the green leaves here and a couple of dead brown ones behind it. I mean, to me that really does feel autumn. It feels like that bit where you've out there. Maybe we've gone past the end of the brambles, as in the fruit. None of those are really left, but the briars are still there, ready to snag your clothing or scratch your hand if you get too close. But the colouring is so evocative for me. And again, you kind of smell the sort of dampness of the leaves. So I think it's a really nice little zooming in, finding a little space, cropping it out, finding that nice little bit of contrast. It's a lovely little kind of well-caught moment, Meg. So thanks for sending that one in. April says, "Good catch, Meg." Stacy says, "Love the fall leaves, nice contrast." Susan says, "Great autumn colours, Meg." And Adrian says, "To me, very reflective, as in the subject of the summer, autumnal nature change." Right, okay, let's move on. So next up then, we've got John from Ohio has sent in this one. Now, John says, "I took this a couple of weeks ago on a road trip outing with some other photographers. We were travelling around southwest Pennsylvania. I brightened up the shot first. In the editing process, I slightly cropped slightly and warmed the scene a bit to enhance the fall colours. It was a cloud day. Before and after are included." So what was quite fun about this one was that John also sent me the before. So this is the after, this is the edited, and then this is the before. So what we can see is actually, in a way, what John has done is kind of what we were suggesting Sandra do in the last one, is he's taken it and he's brightened it. However, there is one little thing I would say here, John, and I think it's a tendency that we all can very easily fall into, is that you've brightened it, and what you've done is you've lifted it all, but I think in a way, by lifting everything, and you've brought detail out of the shadows, is we've almost lost the shadow. When we're in here, okay, it's a bit dull, it's a bit dark, but there are contrasts. What I quite like in the original, obviously, yes, it needs brightening, but I like the contrast of these darker tree trunks against the colour of the leaves. So if we go back to here, because whilst of course there's a bit of contrast because we've got the brown, because they're quite bright, I kind of can't help but think that perhaps maybe not bring up so much detail out of the shadows. So again, I'll just do a quick, don't worry, I'm not going to be editing every single photo that anybody sent in, but there were a couple that just sort of leapt out at me. So let's go to here. So what I mean by this is if we take the levels here, as we can see, like in Sandra's picture, there's a large gap, so it obviously needs brightening, and we can bring this up something, we can bring it up to here. Now at this point, sky's getting very bright, it's probably a bit too bright. Again, if I shove that now and just where do we, oh no, shadows there, go back to here and just sort of very lightly, so I've still got that on 38%, that's fine. So I'll just do that and make sure we can bring in some of the detail, and you can see that actually having taken out the white of the sky, it's given us a little bit more here, and I just pulled this up to about here. Now actually this, I think just on its own, is really giving us something quite nice. It's a lovely shot, as in the road is leading our eye in through the trees, so it's a really nice composition with this. But I think we've now got this kind of contrast. I mean, if I brought it up, so you bring it up too much, it's not going to work. So it really is bringing it up just to the edge there. Now, if we wanted, I suspect we could probably take and drop it up. Let's put this all onto a separate layer and then quick trip into camera raw, which allows us, if I hit auto, what does that do? That brightens it a little bit more. But I'm going to go back here. So let's pull up the exposure a little bit, take down the highlights so we're not blowing that sky. But maybe a little bit of contrast, something like that. And actually it's about, you see, the thing is the temptation is to grab the shadows and pull the shadows up like this, which is kind of what I think you did in your editing process. But I think when we do that, like I said, we lose some of the contrast. I quite like that contrast of the trees. So just allow those shadows to come back to there. And we have all the rich colours, but we don't have, and then, you know, you can do your, you know, little bit of cropping or whatever it was, you know, however it was. I can't remember exactly how you had it, but sort of something like that. So we have all the colours, but we have the contrast. And I think that contrast, the trees themselves, the trunks of the trees, I think, that really helps sort of break up and give that feel of the autumnal leaves. And it's the contrasts which are really lifting and adding to the feel of the picture. Whereas if we go to your one here, we've got very rich colours, and that's great, but I think there isn't so much contrast between the light and dark, and the trees the trunks don't separate off quite so much. So there's, anyway, thoughts there to play with. If you still prefer your own, that's okay. I'm just making suggestions. But a couple of ideas there. I think sometimes we do have to be a little bit careful about maybe just losing a bit too much when we bring too much detail out of the shadows. Comments here. Where are we? Okay, Meg's thanking people for the comments on hers. Oh, Nurije's joined us. Welcome, Nurije. Glad you could make it. Adrian says, with John's photo, nice could be in the UK. Yeah, absolutely. It's those kind of, especially the autumn beaches, really we get a lot of those around here. Meg says really likes the curve in this photo. Stacy said, love the fall colours. Pennsylvania is very colourful at the moment. Susan says, great shot, John. Autumn personified. And April says, oh, wow, looks beautiful. Much more natural. And John says, thanks, I will rethink the edit. Okay, cool. All right, where are we then? Let's move on to Nadia. Yes, Nadia sent in this one. And Nadia says, this one was taken with my phone camera. We were out for we're out for a drive to find a waterfall in West Calder. I come across to find the waterfall I'd come across in a photo. On our walk to the waterfall, I took this with my phone as the sun was shining through the leaves, making them pop out at me. We then clambered further over a very uneven path to get to the actual waterfall that we came to see, where I managed to get the big camera and the tripod out. So interestingly then, that Nadia's gone off to find a big waterfall and go with the big camera and do all the big shot and everything. But the picture she's decided to put in is one she took with her phone on the way. And I think that's kind of fun. I like that idea that as you're travelling somewhere, I mean, I've talked before, you know, I'm actually a really big fan of these. You know, it's not that you have to not for going out and being the full-on professional photographer, but for that kind of instant ability to just capture something and then maybe share it on social media, but also to train your eye. You know, that we've got one of these in our pocket all the time. And if we're out and we just notice and go, oh, actually there's something there, and get into a habit of pulling out our phone, then it becomes observational exercise. It's like doing thumbnail sketches if you're an artist. So I like that idea. Now with this one though, what I would say, drop something there. What I would say, Nadia, is I tend to feel that while yes, the leaves are really, you know, that they're the colourful, that's the light coming through the leaves is what's catching you. Our eye is getting drawn to the waterfall, and the waterfall, in comparison to the whole of the picture, feels rather small. And so I'd be tempted to kind of crop in further. And now, for example, if we were to come in, I don't know, say something like about that. We don't need a lot, massively, but it's really, when we come to here, at least half the picture is this top part of leaves, which is very, very busy. Whereas the leaves that we're most interested in is probably these ones that are actually slightly closer to the waterfall here. So if you come into something like this and probably slightly better if my head wasn't actually taking up this top corner to see that. Actually, okay, I'll tell you what, let's just open this with Photoshop so we can just see the whole picture. So yes, I am ending up editing all the photos, but what I'm really meaning is something like this. So we get the main bit of waterfall here, that little bit of waterfall that's coming off the side, but we don't need, I think, all of the leaves here. If we come into something like this, now we have a couple of the large leaves just dominating, enough of the small leaves in the background to know that it carries on. And now if we zoom into this, I think something like this gives you everything you wanted, which is the waterfall and these lovely yellow leaves catching the light, without it getting so busy in the background that it becomes a little bit distracting. So simple crop with something like that, I think works a little bit better. But lovely picture, Nadia. And like I said, I really love the idea that while you're out, you just kind of grab your phone and go, you know, you're going off with the big camera, but you're still happy to use the phone to grab something on the way. And I think that's what, you know, we all really ought to be doing that kind of thing. So yeah, thank you for sending that one in, Nadia. Comments. Meg says beautiful. Stacy says waterfall and leaves falling, very pretty. Susan says love the golds and browns, Nadia. Stacy says reminds me of going to the mountains of Pennsylvania, which Bar has some wonderful waterfalls. And John says love waterfall scenes. Lots of can't quite see, lots of something which is behind the little symbols in the live chat. I'll notice it next time somebody comments and you've moved above the line. Right, okay. Next up then is Marilyn. And Marilyn has sent in this one. It says, here is my entry for the autumn challenge. I was drawn to these colourful leaves that have fallen and covered an old staircase in the gardens at Haddon Hall near Bakewell. I thought the moss growing on the stairs added to the mood. Any suggestions for improvement are greatly appreciated. Well, yeah, I'm not sure that I maybe put all these images in the right order, because we're into the bits whereby I do seem to feel like now that I am editing all the photos. So yes, what we've done here though is she's found some steps, wonderful leaves on the steps and the moss and the texture into the steps. And I like the idea. What I tend to feel though is this sort of suffers from one of those things that we've talked about before, which is by and large an awful lot of photos tend to be improved either by getting closer or by being slightly further out. There's a tendency when we're hit with a scene to sort of fall into a middle ground whereas a lot of the time, if we're really trying to get, is the story the whole space, or is the story something happening within the space? Now you have cropped off the edge of these, so this is a kind of fill the frame style image whereby we don't see the edge of the stairwell, we don't see the top and the bottom. But at the same time, I can't help but feel that actually you could get, what we're looking for is this idea of how to distill it. So a bit like with Nadia's waterfall there's extra stuff in there that we don't really need, that isn't necessarily adding to the picture, and if anything is diluting it. So by cropping out what we don't need, we manage to distill the essence of what we're trying to communicate here. What you're trying to communicate here is these beautiful colourful leaves on the lichen stained steps with the moss growing out. So it's a real textural piece, and as such I tend to feel get in closer. Not so close that you can't actually see the steps, because the steps are a part of it, but again, relatively simply, if you were to zoom in. Now, I get drawn to the idea of zooming into the colour here, except for the fact that your main focus, your camera's focused down here. By the time we get up to here, we've lost the colour a little bit, because I really like these little patches of red and yellow, and again sitting against the mossy greens. But even if we come down to the sharp bit, you could take something like that, or maybe this little patch over here I quite like, and just literally crop into something like that. So what you've got is maybe no more than two steps. We've got the texture of the moss, we've got the texture of the leaves, and in fact I'm almost tempted to go even further, where you have something where you're just trying to get to that point where you can tell it's steps,
but you also want to have the moss, you want to have the texture of the stone, and you want to have the texture and the colour of the leaves. And so what I would be doing in that place is, whether it's with a phone or a camera, I'd be kind of moving in, zooming in and out until I felt like I got that essence of how much step, how much leaves, how much moss. How close can I get while I still have a sense that it's leaves and moss on steps rather than just so close in it's only leaves, but at the same time not being so far out that it becomes diluted. So I think, you know, something like that is quite good as well. But I think by the time we get up to the sort of the full sort of 4 or 5 steps here, it's kind of become diluted. We don't, because especially because there isn't a single focal point in this. Like I say, the yellow up here grabs me a little bit, but there's so much else here it's not necessarily grabbing. So maybe actually on a personal level, I'd be more tempted to sort of come up, if this bit was in focus, and have it closer to where this yellow leaf stands out even more against the reds. And you've got a patch of moss, and maybe even here we've got a bit of broken step or a separate bit of step. So actually something like that, where we've got a step line here, but then we've also got another one over here, almost sitting on a kind of third half texture. Something like this, I think, tends to have a great deal of colour and texture and mood and feel, and playing around with a lot of the kind of different compositional rules and what have you for photography, is really where you get the essence of what you were looking for, but really ramped up to a much further degree. So I hope you find that one useful, Marilyn. Right, so what have we got? April says, where are we? Creative shots. Susan says, lovely textures on the steps. I like how all the leaves are different shades of red. Stacy's chatting away with John. John says, great shot, Marilyn. I like this a lot. Lines and textures really stand out. And Marilyn says, thanks, Kim. Excellent. Or Susan says, I think Marilyn's image would work great as a triptych. So do you mean by that actually you take just a single image and kind of divide it into 3 like that, or even 3 that way? Or have you got a different idea whereby you're talking about the idea of going back to the same place or steps and photographing them at different times of the year, or with different leaves, or as the leaves change colour? Expand a little bit, Susan. I'm curious as to in what way you would make a triptych out of Marilyn's photo. Right, okay. So, where are we? So just a little reminder here that if you find these podcasts useful, interesting, entertaining even, and you would like to support them, then buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is one of the ways you can do it. Another way, bring your friends along, spread the word. Let's get a few more wonderful people to join this fantastic community of ours. And if you happen to know anybody who wants to sponsor this, then by all means point them in my direction too. Right, okay, so where were we then? Let's move on to Robert Schaefer. So Robert Schaefer from Texas sent in this one and said, while it's not fall temperatures or fall-like temperatures here in Dallas, I think we skipped winter and spring and went straight into summer of 2025. So here's an image I took last year. It was in the Fort Worth Japanese Gardens and was on a Dallas Camera Club field trip. It was my first trip there, and it was full of the fall colours. And I think this is a nice bit of fun here. So again, what Robert has done here is to find steps that are where the leaves are coming down. There's a nice curve of the way the steps come up. So we've got the leaves on the grass over here and the leaves on the steps here, but we can still see the steps within it. Now, this is one where I wonder whether, again, if you actually pulled out a little bit more, would we get, because the steps are a feature of this, and I don't know how high the steps went up. Now, if it was only, I mean, we could see 4 steps in this, and maybe if there was only 4 or 5 steps, that's where you keep it. But something like this, I think, to go back to that point I was making about with Marilyn, I think either you're sort of zooming in more on the texture, so you're wanting the texture of the leaves against the stone, but this is but because these are different, these are stones in a landscape. These are these really, they're not the perfectly carved stones, steps that Marilyn had on hers. These are slabs that have been placed into the landscape, and depending on what else was there, if they went a bit higher, if there was a bit more, I'd kind of be tempted to sort of get slightly more of a landscapey sense out of this and how the steps fit into it. But obviously that depends on what was, maybe that wasn't an option for you. But I do like the way that the steps curve round. So yes, thank you for sending that one along, Robert. Where are we at? April says pretty yellow leaves. And Marilyn says thank you everyone for a great idea. Susan says great, Robert. Are those ginkgo leaves? Well, I'll take it that I've not heard of those ones. John says similar to last image, yet I like it, yet different. I like it also. Yes, and this is part of it. I think, on the one hand, if you are writing a title that says autumn leaves on steps, both Marilyn and Robert's pictures fall into, could fit that title, and yet both are completely different colouring, different steps, different textures, different crop, different interpretation. And that's part of what I love about photography, is that each of us, even given exactly the same brief, even if we had exactly the same camera standing in exactly the same place, we would all find something different, and that's part of the fun of that. And that's also why I think these challenges tend to work so well. Why I love doing them is because everybody sends in something slightly different, and when I go through them and I show everybody all what we've done, we all had the brief fall, autumn, but everybody's come at it from a slightly different way, and then that in turn reflects back and inspires us. So we might have been busy focused on the idea of perhaps doing a road or something, and then we go, oh, it's the steps. Actually, you know what? My neighbour's got some steps like that, or there were these lovely steps in a woodland path. Maybe it's worth going back there. Or even the bramble leaves, sitting in the garden in a patch that we haven't cultivated or anything, or we just left so that we could get the brambles. What have I got in the garden? Where can I get in close up? So, as we look at other people's images, it inspires us to see how we could go back to it as well. Right. So, next up then, we will go to Nurije. So Nurije says, this is my autumn challenge. I took this a couple of days ago on a short visit to Bath. So, leaves coming, light, sunlight coming through the leaves. But this time we have a cityscape. I think this is our only real urban image. Unless I've forgotten one of the other ones later. But this is rather lovely, I think. So in Bath, down in southwest England, it's a city which is kind of a Georgian city, really. An awful lot of it was sort of built up in Georgia a couple of hundred years ago, and it has these sort of quite grand buildings, the spire of the church, these kind of large, the architecture is, if you know Bath, you would kind of you wouldn't be at all surprised. These pillars and what have you. So I presume, I'm guessing that there's the river running down below with the arch here, spire coming up. So what Nurije's done is a kind of frame within a frame as well. So she's using the leaves in order to frame the spire of the church. So yeah, nice one. That square, I think this works quite well square. If you were doing a more landscape one, you could do something like this. I think just kind of crop out the top again, and actually that's not a bad kind of composition either, I think. So we've still got just as much. We've got the leaves coming in, the bright colours. You've caught all the leaves you need, but now, if we come in closer like this, you find you're making more of the fact of that particular kind of sandstone architecture, and yeah, I quite like that. I do have to say, square would work much better as a kind of Instagram post, obviously. So yes, thank you for sending that one in, Nadia. Nurije, sorry. It's it's really nice that, it's that variation. Most of the ones we've done tend to be in the countryside or in the garden or whatever, but to actually get into the city and use the autumn leaves and what have you, create some nice contrast of the organic against the kind of the stonework of that people have carved. So what have we got here? Stacy says, lovely yellow leaves. April says, yes, so interesting. Enjoy shots like this. Stacy says, very pretty. Love the church scene. Susan says, super light, Nurije. The trees really frame your image nicely. Right, okay, on to April then. And April has this really colourful scene with the lake. Says, here is my autumn challenge submission. It was taken in New Hampshire by a lake near where my sister lives. I love the colours of the trees and the leaves with a few in the lake. And yeah, this is really captured. We've got the sunlight coming in from the right, and we've got it's a lovely composition. This I do wonder whether it might just be you could tilt it a fraction clockwise, but that is just trying to work out whether the horizon's straight or not. I think there's about probably a degree or half a degree in it. However, the fact that you've got all these trees on the left, the branches overhanging, moving off to the right, we've got the patch of water here, and as you say, the water itself is nice. We've got leaves and what have you dotted about, floating around in the water as well, help break that up nicely. There's nice, although it's not a mirror smooth piece of water, there are still, we're still getting the red reflections from the tree over here are making themselves felt into the waters here. So yeah, very pleasant, and it's got a very warm autumnal feel to it. Lovely colours, nice composition. So thanks for sending that one in, April. What have we got here? Okay, Nurije's chatting to Susan. Stacy says, love the curves and colours. John says, great capture, April. I like the lines and colours. Marilyn says, beautiful, April. Mick says, wow, that's incredible. I really like the use of the diagonals. And Susan says, gorgeous autumn image, April. Right. Now we move on to Rebecca. And Rebecca sent in this one and said, this is my submission for the autumn challenge taken on my phone. I cropped the image slightly to get rid of the visual noise. This was wet tree roots in my local woods with the fallen leaves clustered in the hollows. I thought it looked kind of like a dragon's claw, perhaps stalking through a hoard of golden coins. But I was initially struck by the contrast of the dark roots and the bright leaves. Now, I like that. Unfortunately, the image that you put in, Rebecca, is quite small, and so it might not have been that small on your camera, or you've cropped it in a great deal. So it doesn't mean that it does mean that there's not a huge amount we can do with it. So it's quite small on the screen. If I zoom a little bit, what we can start to see here though is, and I really love this idea, that there's almost like this kind of dragon claw coming down here, and then the leaves become like the gold coins. Now I think if you're going to do something like this, we don't need to turn it into a dragon's claw as such. But if we go into here, I think what we will want to do is sort of to slightly emphasize that idea with it. So with something like this, I think if I just duplicate that for a moment, and if I was to say, first of all, take the curves, and I'm going to darken the whole thing down a little bit, but I'm then going to use the mask. Didn't mean to press that one. Just small that down, and we'll take that back up to 100% for the moment, and just lighten back up on where the claw is and the leaves. So what we're trying to do is just sort of draw a little bit more attention to what's going on here. And then what I will do is flip that back, and where do we get X, and just maybe darken in just a little bit more shadow in places, just like that. So we've got the richness of the colours there. Now, what I think I would maybe also do with this, I'll take that whole lot, copy that, and just do a quick camera raw edit, because what I really want to do is kind of emphasize, as you say, this kind of claw bit here. So what I might do is, well, first of all, let's contrast that a little bit. Shadows up, contrast, and actually I'll do a little bit more of a vignette. Yeah, the vignette's quite good, kind of draws that in. So that's a kind of next level shift. And I'm going to copy this again, just so that we can mask the bits that I want. And then if I go back to camera raw, now what I want to do is I want to really emphasize the texture. So I'm going to go to effects, and I'm going to take this clarity tool, and I want to emphasize the texture, but I don't want it happening all over the place. I'm just wanting it to happen where I want to place it. So now when I come back to this, I'm going to hold down my Alt key and press the mask. That covers it all back in. And now when I go to white here, it means I can paint it back in selectively. And if I just paint it back along the claw here, and maybe into just these little golden patches, or your gold coins as such, something like that. And what we end up with is something like this. So again, if I just group all those together, we've gone from that to this. And all we're really doing is just kind of emphasizing that little bit more of that sense of a claw coming down into the coins. If you actually wanted to create an actual claw, perhaps what you'd probably have to do is do something like that, and then into the generative fill type dragon claw. Now actually I haven't tried this at home already, so let's just see whether see what it actually does. Can never really tell with Photoshop generative fill. Sometimes it kind of creates something where you just go, oh wow, and sometimes it, well, that's kind of interesting. We've now got some kind of lizard-like claw. Oh, that one looks even more interesting, I think. That one definitely looks more finger-like. That one looks more like the kind of root of a tree. Anyway, that's playing around with it. The fact is, this is your original, and that's the fun part. But I really like that idea, Rebecca. I think it was kind of fun. I like, that notion, because we do see that sometimes we're out there and we see it's twisted routes, especially, and if you've got an imagination that goes down particular roads, especially if you're one of these who's into your kind of Lord of the Rings, fairy tales, anything like that, and woods are magical places. There's all sorts of things you can see. And I think if something grabs you like that and you take the photo, it's then partly about the editing. What you're looking for is, how can I emphasize the bit that I'm finding interesting? If I think this looks a bit like a claw, now what can I do to emphasize that claw-like nature to it? Or if I think this looks like a little creature half hidden in the woods here, how can I make it look more like a creature in the editing process, by the way that I crop it, by the way that I lighten and darken, or the way I add texture or blur it out, or blur out other bits in order to draw attention to it. And that's really what the editing process is about how to distill, how to emphasize, how to intensify the narrative, the story that you're wanting to communicate. So thank you for sending that one in, Rebecca. I think it was a lot of fun. I really like that idea. Right, so where are we? Marilyn says, nice abstract. Nurije says, love the red colours of those leaves, April. And right, okay, so then we're on to Susan says, love the shapes and the leaves that are making and the leaves that are making Rebecca. I think there's a word missing somewhere. Adrian says, the wood looks almost burnt. April says, creative abstract. John says, interesting shot, good eye. Okay, next up then we have Janet. And Janet decided to go Halloween based with this one. And here we have the bride and groom. Janet says, hi Kim, I've not had a chance to edit all of my autumn images from this year yet. Still working on the trip photos, which will take a while. So I selected some Halloween decoration shot last year with fall colours in the background. So that's a fun one, I think. Yeah, we just... and yes, you're right, it makes it all that more Halloween because of fantastic colours in the background here. Those really deep reds going on behind, and it does have that autumnal feel to it, for the happy couple. So nicely spotted there, Janet. And yeah, thanks for sending that one in. Put a smile on my face. Stacy says, love the Halloween vibe. April says, this is a fun and cute shot. And Susan says, brilliant, Janet. And Adrian's put a laughing emoji. Next up we have Graham. And Graham says, here's my submission for the autumn challenge. Luckily, I live next door to a community orchard and went ninja tonight to capture this. Added a few extras, as autumn is a little later here in the southwest of England. Yes, because Graham does in fact live down in Devon, whereas next door to Cornwall, where Susan was, where autumn's barely started. So Graham nipped into the orchard next door and managed to find a couple of fallen apples and foraged around to find a couple of extras to sort of put in and create this sort of almost sort of still life type feeling to it. So yeah, fun. We've got all these. It's a very strong light coming in. So I'm just wondering, is that a torch light maybe Graham was using, or perhaps it was street light, or maybe a light from a building or something like that, creating a hard light here. It does mean that there's quite a lot of black up in the left corner here, which I don't think is necessarily needed. And as such, I think just a little bit of cropping in, and if we sort of to do something, I've got a little patch here. I'm not totally sure. I'd be kind of tempted to sort of do something a little bit more like this, maybe a little bit more underneath. Let's try to find the right crop. I'm not going to find the right crop just by zooming here. I will just quickly open that in Photoshop, because I think really what you're needing here, Graham, is that there's this large dark patch here, and I think either in your editing process you needed to draw out, if there was something interesting in here, you needed to draw out the shadows so we could see what it is. Otherwise it's a kind of a large black place which is sucking things away and diluting what is really your part here, which is, I would say, is more this. And then here, because it's about the apple and the contrast between the textures in the apple and the leaves, and this apple, you know, the red leaf here, the drying out leaves here, the green leaves here. So you've kind of created, I don't know how much you say you added a couple of extras, so you've clearly decided that what you wanted was the contrast of the change of the textures and the colours. So as such, go in that little bit closer to, a bit like I was talking with the steps shot earlier, go in closer and emphasize, intensify, distill, that's the word I'm looking for, to sort of distill what you're wanting, rather than kind of diluting it by having too much around the outside. But yeah, fun shot. Now, Graham goes on to say, in an attempt to gain smug points, which I love, he goes on to say, can I add that I met the inventor of both Ilford colour negative film, that only attempt, and Ilford XP2, which is a black and white film that can be processed in C41 chemicals. Now, there might only be a handful of you who actually know what that means. And so he goes on, this probably sounds like witchcraft to some of you, but us oldies will remember. He is well into his late 80s now and was walking his dog while I was photographing my entry for today. We got chatting and he asked if I shot in black and white. So, I mean, if you did your photography back in the old days of film, and you were into your film stock and Ilford films, and you have that kind of intensity about it, there's a few people I've come across before now who will talk for hours wistfully and nostalgically about particular kinds of film stock, which will give a particular edge or feel to the printed photos. Then at this point, you know, Graham has met a kind of somebody who is, you know, a superstar, you know, like meeting some kind of legend, the person who was actually the inventor of Ilford colour negative film and their black and white, a particular kind of black and white. So now I do have to say, Graham, that it does go all completely over my head because I am a photographer of the digital age. Any analog stuff I did was just with little point and shoots. It was before my time. I didn't really do photography back in the analog days beyond family snapshots with a cheap camera. However, I do understand the significance of that. So I am going to award you, because I think that is a fun story and very photography related. I'm going to award you an extra bonus 20 smug points for that. I think that was a lot of fun. So nice one there, Graham. Bonus smug points to you for that. Okay, cool. Right. What have we got here? People are saying hi, Viji. Yes, Viji says, relatives came in. Good evening. Oh, right, glad you could make it along, Viji. Says, we'll watch the recap. A few people saying hi to Viji. So April says, nice with the crop, a night abstract shot. And Susan says, what an interesting conversation you must have had with the Ilford guy, Graham. Cool, right, okay, so we are now going to move on to Viji's picture, which could be good timing. And Viji, where are we? Sent in this one, which is rather beautiful. Now, Viji says, while we celebrate many festivals in India, Diwali is the most popular and is celebrated with pomp and cheer. It is celebrated for 3 days in northern parts of India. However, in southern India, we celebrate it for a day, but we reserve another day for a continued celebration during next month called Karthigai. I hope that's how I think it's Karthigai. I think we've had this mentioned that one before, so I hope I'm pronouncing it right, Viji. People decorate their homes with lights, traditional earthenware lamps and candles. The best part is that we visit and receive friends and relatives during Diwali. For the autumn challenge, I was wondering what could be done, because while it's rainy season here, for the past 10 or 15 days, very short spells of rain, only very short spells of rain have been seen. This year, both Diwali and Halloween came on the same day, the 31st of October. And since Halloween is not particularly celebrated in India, Diwali is native to our country and well worthy of being showcased. So I created a nook with a traditional brass water fountain, Krishna with his concert Radha, the dancing and singing women, Gopikors. Viji has very kindly given me how to pronounce it, and I'm still not sure that I'm getting it right, but I hope I'm not absolutely murdering your language here. Cheering Krishna and Radha. Sorry. I also adorned the corner with flowers, lights and lamps. I've taken a video which I will share in the group for everyone to see, and she has. So if you haven't been there yet, if you go to the Facebook group, Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, and go and check into that, Viji has put up a little video of this where you can kind of move around and see some more of the accompaniments and the background and all the bits and pieces that have gone into this very beautiful scene. I think it's stunning. I think it's really lovely. It's beautifully lit, beautifully evocative. You really get a feel of what you've created here. So yeah, very impressed with this one, Viji. Thank you for sending in, and also thank you for telling us a bit more about the kind of cultural significance of it as well. And hopefully anybody who's interested as well, now got enough information to kind of go and Google a few things, look up Wikipedia and get a bit more background information. So thank you for sending that one in, Viji. What have we got? Viji says, I did pronounce Karthigai right. Good. April says, like the bouquet in the background. Marilyn says, beautiful image. Susan says, beautiful, colourful image. Viji, love the bouquet. John says, very nice photo of the celebration. Nurije says, I love this Viji, beautiful. And Stacy says, enjoy your celebrations. Right, Stacy is next up then. We will move on to Stacy. And Stacy sent in this one, which feels really bright and bold and colourful. She says, last week we drove to Bristol Township, which is a suburb of Bucks County, Pennsylvania. The township is laid out near the Delaware River. It is at a small area of quaint shops, outdoor restaurants on a wharf, which is where I took this shot. It was a warm October day, and Barry and I were out walking our little dog Ginger along the park, alongside the Delaware. The boat was riding along, and the trees are showing magnificent colours. So this is a lovely one, Stacy. I love it's a really nice composition. I think that kind of panoramic or cinematic kind of feel, it works well, because I think further back you'd have had too much water, too much sky. So by cropping it in this way, you've managed to kind of capture the essence of it. Nice straight horizon. I like the way it curves up. The trees build up from the left to the right, and then we've got the boat, and the boat is coming into the picture, which is the really important bit. That you want to have that that sense of the boat moving into you. It's pointing in the right direction. We've talked before that for the most part, unless there's exceptions to it, you want to have something that's moving directional. You want to have so it's got most of the picture to move into. And so on balance then, all these bits kind of add up, and I think this is a really strong picture, and I'm well impressed, Stacey. So yeah, thank you very much for sending that one in. Nice and colourful. April says, very, oh, hang on a sec, before we get that, Adrian says, for your information, Viji, I'm in the UK, and it has been on the local news bulletins about Peterborough, the nearest city to me, celebrating Diwali. And Viji says, oh, that's good to hear. April says, very pretty, Stacy. John says, what a contrast between the water and trees. Meg says, magnificent. I also really like the curves of the trees. Viji says, very beautiful, Stacy. Colours are astounding. And Stacey says, thank you. Susan says, lovely composition, Stacey, lovely colours. And John says, the boat adds somehow. And I think you're right. The boat adds, it stops it just being plain water, and it makes it feel like this is a place that's being lived in as well. Right, so one more photo then, on to Robert, and then I will announce my top 3 and tell you what's coming up over the rest of the month. So stick around. So on to finally then, Robert Gulick did a quick leapt in, sent me something. He said, we're currently in the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee and have limited access to Wi-Fi. Here's a shot from my phone. It will be next week before I can get my Canon photos online. So a little bit of a problem also for Robert Schaefer and for one or two others, where we set the autumn challenge based on April's suggestions, only to find that for certain places in the country, autumn's barely started yet, and they've not really had much of a chance to get out. However, this one, I really like this one. I think this is there's a good strong curve. This is the essence of a leading line shot, you know, and especially when we talked before about if you're using diagonals, which is a nice strong diagonal with these yellow lines running up, that actually if the diagonal runs into the corner of an image, it tends to make it more a stronger feel to it than if it's just slightly missing. So on a compositional level, to have the lines coming up from directly into the corner of the picture, and then it swings to the left, swings to the right, we get this lovely kind of zigzaggy curve leading us into, we've got the fall colours around the place. I think it's a really strong shot, and to quickly caught on the phone. Yeah, again, I like that idea. You know, I know you've got the big camera, and I know you'll be taking a lot of great photos, but it's that notion of, like earlier with Nadia's photo, that notion that, you know, you can still use the phone to catch something which actually you just might not have gone to the effort of taking out your big camera to sort of try and line up, and you can still get something. So good strong photo there, Robert. Thank you for sending that one in. So thank you then to absolutely everybody for sending in their images. I think we've had a good 15 different images, lots of great ideas. Talked about some of these, we've made little corrections to enhance the narrative of them, and so I hope you're all kind of feeling a little bit inspired by what you've seen, and it will give you some ideas to go out, whether it's framing buildings with leaves, or whether it's finding roads and paths to draw your eye into, having a thought about whether is the scene better to be pulled further back out of and get a bigger sense of what's going on, or is it better to zoom in, find the detail. We've had a really nice range. So a couple of comments here. What have we got? April says, pretty autumn road shot. Susan says, great S-curve, Robert. I really like the wet road. Meg says, I love the zigzag of the road. Viji says, wow. John says, the Smokies are a favourite place to shoot for me. Usually very good colours. Adrian says, cool images. Difficult to choose a top 3, to be honest. Absolutely. and nice on the range of people's perceptions and shots. And Nurije says, I agree with Susan Robert. And Nurije says the road with the curves and autumn colours the best. Right, so when it comes to choosing a top three, it's a tricky one, as always. And ultimately, the three that I choose and the order I put them in, all of you are going to disagree. Everybody's going to have their own favourite one, one that they would have ranked second or third or whatever. And that's the way it is. So, however, this is my podcast. You want to do it differently? Set up your podcast. So what I'm going to do here is, to be honest, I think my favourite one, let's just, where are we? Let's go to here. I think I have to award the top points to Viji for this one. I just, it's beautiful. It's just so, it's beautifully composed. The sharp, you've got a wide angle, wide aperture, and the focus is just at exactly the right point where the water is just starting to pour into. There's a sort of, again, we've got that, there's enough slow shutter speed for, we're starting to get the like little trickles of light reflecting. The sharpness is just in the right place where it's catching the water and the edge of the brass bit here. There's a warmth, there's colour, there's texture, there's mood, there's feel. I can practically sort of feel the slight warmth of the candle flames and sort of smell the perfumes and the incenses in the oil and whatever else you've got. And then the beautiful, the contrasting colours of the yellows and the pinks and that kind of thing. I think it is really a beautiful photo, Viji. So bonus 30 points to Viji for this one. Then I think my second place bonus 20 points is going to go to Susan. This is this is a lovely, really lovely photo. It's well thought out. It's well planned. Having the focus on the grass in the front, I think the temptation will be to maybe focus on one of the little bits of waterfall, but actually I think it works a lot better by having it on the grass. The grass is being the ground, but we're not going for kind of full bokeh here. We're getting the softness from a long shutter speed. We've still very clearly got the bracken in the background, and again you can kind of hear the water trickling. You can also sort of smell that kind of the wet bracken. So lovely shot there. So Susan, you get a bonus 20 points there for second place. I think my third place, actually I'm going to give to Rebecca for this, just quite simply because of the fun of it. I that idea of the dragon claw coming out and grasping the gold coins, it's just a wonderful piece of imagination. I love that idea that when you're out in the woods, these are the kind of things you see in these. And then I think there's a notion here that this is a great starting point to then see how could I then set about enhancing it. But it's the concept of this that really grabs me. So a bonus 10 smug points to you there, Rebecca. Now a couple of commendeds as well. I think Meg's bramble leaf, I really like that. I think so. I'll give you a bonus 5 smug points for that. April, your scene with the water and the trees, really colourful. Stacy, love your picture with the water and the trees and the boat, just really grabs me. And Robert, your road wiggling through the autumn trees. So each of you will get a bonus 5 commended smug points for that. And of course, Graham gets his bonus 20 smug points for his Ilford inventor story, which was a lot of fun. So thank you ever so much to everybody who sent in the images. Right, final things to just chat with now. Oh, a few people congratulating Viji and other people. So that's great. Oh, and Viji says, you're very kind. Thank you, feeling motivated. That's really good. So next, now, Viji won the smug points. If we swing back to the beginning, I said that Viji won the smug points leaderboard for October, which meant that she got to choose the subject for the November challenge. And what Viji has gone for is really interesting. It's Faceless Portraits. So the idea of a portrait, I mean, we've done couple of podcasts before now on portraits, and portraits, generally speaking, about the expression, about the mood of the face. we tend to think of a portrait as a face, but can you do a portrait of somebody without seeing the face? And there's a whole number of different ways you can do this, from objects in front to shadows to props to shoot the angle you shoot at, silhouetting, all this kind of stuff. So I thought this would be a great one to go for. So next week on the 10th of November, I'm going to be talking about faceless portraits. So I'm going to run through my archive, see what I can find, dig out, and I'll take you through a whole bunch of ideas of ways you can approach this topic. And then you've got 2 weeks to do an image, okay? We will then have a faceless portrait challenge for the 24th of November. So next week I tell you all about it, and then 2 weeks after that you get to put in your image. And it'll be really interesting to see how people are going to approach this idea of a faceless portrait. But you don't have to feel stuck and lost at the moment. Tune in next week and I'll give you a whole bunch of ideas of how you can go about it and ways to play and experiment. So it's a lovely topic. So really thanks a lot to Viji for thinking of that one. And in between, on the 17th, we'll have a feedback critique session. Okay, so that's your chance. So you send in the photos that you would like personal feedback on. Either email them to me, kim@kimayres.co.uk. So kim@kimayres.co.uk. You can just email me the image, or you can place it in the Facebook group, which on Facebook, well, just type in Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres. Go to the Facebook group and drop your image in there. Now, whether you put it into the Facebook group or you email it to me personally, tell me a little bit about your image, where you feel your sticking points were, what kind of feedback you're looking for, what kind of help are you after, and I will do my best to help you. There's not many places on the internet which really give you where you can go for personalized and free feedback on your particular photo. So we have all these ideas and I can come up with these notions and you can learn all these things, but sometimes with your own photos it's much harder to see how to get past something. You've got the essence of something there, but perhaps the photo just isn't doing what you want. Send it in for the 17th, the podcast for the 17th. So in which case, get it in earlier. I'll have space for 3 or 4 feedback, and these will be done on a first come first served basis. So if you want to have feedback on any of your images, try and dig them out fairly soon and get them to me. So Faceless Portraits next week, feedback session the week after, and the Faceless Portraits challenge for the week after that, and that'll take us to the last Sunday in November. So that basically pulls us to an end here. Thank you ever so much for everybody once again for sending in their images, and thank you to each of you who've turned up, said hello, and kept the conversation going. It's always much more lively when we know we have people taking part. Last couple of comments here. Or people are talking about having so a few kind of good evening, see you all next week, and Adrian's saying there was that apple in front of the face. Yeah, well, you can making references to particular artists and styles and surrealists as well. That's absolutely valid as well. Right, okay, that's us. Thank you. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your week. Bye bye.